The sound of the waves rolled gently across the cliffs of Cornwall, brushing the edges of the new villa that stood proudly above the coast. The air was thick with salt and sunlight, and Eleanor could hardly believe that the place now belonged to her. It had been a birthday surprise. Her daughter, Amelia, had driven all the way from London, smiling like a conspirator as she handed her parents a small velvet box. Inside was a silver key, gleaming with promise. "A villa, Mum," Amelia said, her voice bright with excitement. "For you and Dad. Somewhere peaceful, by the sea." Eleanor had laughed, tears filling her eyes. For a moment, she had forgotten the distance that had quietly grown between her and Richard. Her husband stood beside her, clapping Amelia on the shoulder, his charm as smooth as ever. Yet something in his smile seemed too polished, too deliberate. When they arrived at the villa that evening, Eleanor felt a strange pull in her chest, not of joy, but of unease. The rooms were pristine, the sea glittered beyond the terrace, and Richard wandered from one hallway to another as if inspecting property he already owned. Later that night, as Eleanor unpacked, she heard Richard on the phone. His voice was low, intimate. She caught a single name, Clara. The name fell like a stone into her heart. She froze, the blouse in her hand slipping to the floor. For months, she had ignored the signs, the late nights, the hidden texts, the faint scent of perfume that wasn't hers. But now, in this house their daughter had gifted them, the truth had finally reached her doorstep. Still, when she entered the living room, she smiled. Richard looked up, startled. "Everything all right, darling?" he asked, his tone falsely gentle. Eleanor nodded. "Perfect," she said softly. "Just perfect." The next morning, sunlight spilled through the tall glass windows, painting golden streaks across the marble floor. Eleanor sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, pretending to read the newspaper while Richard hummed to himself, scrolling on his phone. It was a small sound, a faint notification tone, but it pulled her eyes up. She caught a glimpse of lace on the screen, white and delicate, and beneath it, the words, £350. A nightgown. Her breath caught. She knew every perfume, every fabric that her skin could tolerate. Lace wasn't one of them. Richard had never bought her anything made of lace, not since the allergic rash that once left her arms red and burning. So who was it for? She forced her voice to remain calm. Shopping for something special. Richard looked up, startled for a split second before regaining his charm. "Oh, this? Just a bit of nonsense from an advert. You know how these things pop up." Eleanor nodded slowly, her gaze steady on him. She'd lived with that tone for years, the careful dismissal, the quiet belittling that always made her doubt herself. But this time, she felt no doubt. Only clarity. Later that afternoon, she found the receipt in his briefcase. Same nightgown. Same price. Ordered 2 days ago, delivered to an address she didn't recognize, in Truro. When Richard returned that evening, she waited. He poured himself a glass of whiskey, the amber liquid catching the light like deceit in a bottle. "I saw what you bought," Eleanor said quietly. He froze for a second, then smiled thinly. "I don't know what you're talking about." "The nightgown," she said, her tone sharp enough to cut through the silence. "White lace. £350. Delivered to someone named Clara Hastings." The glass slipped from his hand and shattered on the floor. Whiskey spread across the tiles like a stain of guilt. "Don't start, Eleanor," he snapped. "You've been paranoid for months. I'm tired of living under suspicion." She didn't flinch. "Then stop giving me reasons." His face twisted in anger. "I want a divorce," he spat. Eleanor blinked once, her heart pounding but her voice calm. "Do you?" Richard straightened, defiant. "Yes. I'll move into the villa full-time. You can stay in the city flat. It's better for both of us." Eleanor rose from her chair. The storm outside had begun to build, wind rattling against the glass. "Fine," she said softly. "If that's what you want." But as he turned away, she smiled to herself, not out of surrender, but because she already knew something Richard didn't. Something that would turn his plan into his ruin. Rain lashed against the windows the following morning, drumming a steady rhythm that seemed to echo Eleanor's heartbeat. Richard had left early, he said, for a meeting in Truro, though she no longer cared for his lies. The silence that followed him out the door was both sharp and liberating. By midday, Amelia arrived, her coat soaked and her eyes wide with worry. "Mum, what's going on?" she asked the moment she stepped in. "Dad called me last night. He said you were being unreasonable again." Eleanor sighed softly, motioning for her daughter to sit. "Is that what he told you?" Amelia nodded, brushing wet hair from her face. "He said you accused him of things that aren't true. That you're losing trust in him." A small, sad smile crossed Eleanor's lips. "And what do you believe, darling?" The question seemed to unsettle Amelia. She hesitated, her eyes flicking between her mother's calm expression and the storm raging outside. "I don't know. You two have argued before, but never like this." Eleanor reached for her daughter's hand. "Your father is not the man you think he is. He's been unfaithful, Amelia." Amelia's eyes widened. "No, that can't be. I've seen the messages. The receipts. The name of the woman. Clara Hastings." The color drained from Amelia's face. "Clara, his student." Eleanor nodded. "He didn't even try to hide it very well." There was a long pause. Amelia looked down, her expression torn between disbelief and hurt. "Why would he do this? After everything we've given him? After this house?" Eleanor's gaze shifted toward the sea beyond the glass. "Because men like your father believe love is something they can own, and discard when they please." Amelia swallowed hard. "He told me the villa was meant for both of you. That it would bring you closer." Eleanor turned back to her daughter, her voice steady. "It did bring us closer, Amelia. Close enough for me to see who he truly is." A faint crash of thunder rolled over the coast. The sound filled the silence that followed, heavy and electric. Amelia's eyes filled with tears. "What will you do?" Eleanor took a deep breath, her fingers tightening around the teacup. "For now, I'll let him believe he's winning. But when the time comes, he'll understand why I smiled when he asked for that divorce." The rain intensified, streaming down the glass like silver threads, as if the sky itself wept for what had been lost, and for what was about to begin. A week passed, and Richard barely came home. When he did, it was only to collect clothes or papers, his attitude cold and clipped. Eleanor watched him quietly, no longer pleading or asking questions. Her silence unnerved him more than any argument could. One evening, as the wind howled outside and the sea thrashed against the cliffs, Eleanor sat alone in the study. The house felt too still, like a theater waiting for the next act. On a whim, she opened Richard's laptop, which he had carelessly left unlocked. She wasn't searching for trouble. But trouble, it seemed, had already made itself comfortable. At first, it was ordinary, work emails, invoices, old correspondence. Then she noticed an unfamiliar icon on the browser bar. Pinterest. Eleanor frowned. Richard was many things, but creative wasn't one of them. Curious, she clicked. What she found made her blood turn to ice. A private board named Our Future, filled with photographs of designer gifts, expensive wine, and holiday homes. But the captions beneath the pictures told the true story. "For my darling Clara. You deserve all the luxury she never could give me. Our new life will begin here." Eleanor's breath trembled. Dozens of images, hundreds of words, each one proof of betrayal, carefully documented like a diary of deceit. And there, among the images, was a photograph of her villa, tagged, "Our Seaside Escape." Her hands shook. That house had been Amelia's gift to them, yet Richard had already claimed it for his affair. Just then, the sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway. Eleanor quickly closed the tab, her heart hammering in her chest. Richard entered, holding his phone, a smirk playing on his lips. "Still up?" he asked casually. "Couldn't sleep," she replied, her tone smooth, unreadable. He poured himself a drink. "You know, Eleanor, maybe it's time we stop pretending. I'm filing the papers tomorrow. Let's make this easy for both of us." Eleanor's eyes met his, calm and deliberate. "Of course, Richard. If that's what you want." He smiled, clearly pleased by her compliance. "Good. I knew you'd come to your senses." When he left the room, Eleanor exhaled slowly and opened her phone. She took photos of everything, the Pinterest board, the messages, the timestamps. Her proof. Then she whispered to herself, "You may think I'm finished, Richard, but you've only written the beginning." Outside, lightning forked over the sea, illuminating the villa in flashes of white, a house built on deceit, about to witness its reckoning. The following morning brought an uneasy calm. Eleanor sat by the kitchen window, watching the mist curl through the trees. The letter she'd found the previous night, addressed to her late mother, written in the same delicate hand as the journal, still lay open on the table. Its words echoed in her mind. "Meet me by the old sycamore, where the woods remember." She had no idea who had written it, nor why it had been hidden in the wall of the study. But one thing was clear, someone had wanted this secret buried. At midday, she decided to follow the clue. The woods behind Ashcombe stretched for miles, tangled and whispering with age. Her boots crunched against the damp earth as she followed the faint trail leading deeper into the trees. The air grew colder, heavier. Then, through the mist, she saw it, the old sycamore, enormous and gnarled, its bark split with age. Beneath its roots lay something half buried in the soil, a small iron box, rusted and bound with a decaying ribbon. With trembling hands, Eleanor unearthed it and pried it open. Inside were faded photographs, a silver locket, and a birth certificate. Her breath caught as she read the name. It wasn't hers. But the mother listed was Margaret Ashcombe. A sudden crack of a twig made her spin around. A figure stood among the trees, tall, dressed in dark clothes. She couldn't see their face, only the glint of something metallic in their hand. "Who's there?" she demanded, her voice shaking. No answer. The figure took one step closer. Then another. And just as Eleanor stumbled backwards, clutching the box to her chest, she heard the whisper carried through the wind, soft, almost mournful. "You shouldn't have found that." The woods seemed to close in around her as the mist thickened, swallowing the path she had come from. Eleanor stumbled out of the woods just as dusk began to fall, the box clutched tightly against her chest. Her pulse thundered in her ears, every shadow stretching longer across the grounds of Ashcombe Hall. She didn't dare look back. Whoever that figure was, they had melted into the mist the moment she'd reached the edge of the clearing. Back inside, she locked every door, her hands still trembling. The fire in the parlor had burned low, casting flickering light against the portraits that lined the walls. The faces of her ancestors seemed to watch her, cold, accusing. She placed the iron box on the table and opened it again, examining its contents under the lamplight. The locket contained two tiny portraits, one of a young woman she recognized as her mother, Margaret, and another of a man she had never seen before. Beneath them, the inscription read, "To M, forever bound by truth." Eleanor's mind raced. Who was this man? And whose birth certificate lay in the box? The name was Clara Whitby, born in 1989, mother, Margaret Ashcombe. There was no father listed. Eleanor had been born just 1 year later. A knock shattered the silence. She froze. 3 firm raps echoed from the front door. No one ever came to Ashcombe unannounced, not since her mother's funeral. "Who is it?" she called, her voice steadier than she felt. No answer. The knocking came again, louder this time, more insistent. She approached cautiously, peering through the narrow pane of glass. A man stood on the doorstep, drenched from the rain, his dark coat glistening under the lantern. His face was half hidden beneath a hat. "Miss Ashcombe." His voice carried a faint northern accent. "I'm sorry to call so late. My name's Inspector Hale. I believe you've found something that belongs to the estate archives." Her grip tightened on the doorknob. "I don't know what you mean," she said carefully. His eyes lifted to meet hers, calm, unreadable. "Then perhaps you'd allow me to explain inside." Every instinct told her to send him away. But something else, something she couldn't name, made her open the door just enough for him to step into the hall. The moment he did, Eleanor caught the faint scent of damp earth and smoke clinging to his coat. And when he set his hat on the table, droplets of water fell next to the very birth certificate she had just been reading. He noticed it immediately. His expression didn't change, but his voice did, softening almost to a whisper. "So," he said quietly, "you've already seen her name." Eleanor's stomach turned cold. "You knew Clara Whitby?" she asked. He looked at her for a long moment, then said, "I didn't just know her, Miss Ashcombe. I'm the one who buried her." Eleanor's heart stumbled over itself. The air in the parlor grew heavy, as if the house itself was listening. The words "I buried her" echoed in her mind, each one louder than the last. She took a step back from Inspector Hale, searching his face for a hint of deceit, but found only the solemn stillness of a man carrying a truth he wished he could forget. "Clara Whitby is dead," she whispered. He nodded slowly. "She was found nearly 15 years ago at the edge of the Ashcombe estate, beneath the old willow by the stream. The cause of death was never confirmed, though the villagers still speak of it in hushed tones. I was the one who investigated, back when I was still a young constable." Eleanor's hand trembled against the back of the chair. "And you think my family had something to do with it?" Hale's gaze shifted to the fire, its glow deepening the lines around his eyes. "Let's just say, it was never clear who she truly was. The name on the certificate you found, it disappeared from the records years ago. Officially, Clara Whitby never existed." The flames crackled sharply. Somewhere upstairs, a door creaked open of its own accord. Eleanor's mind spun. If her mother had hidden that box, it meant she'd known Clara. But why hide her existence? And why would the woman be buried on their land? She crossed to the window, looking out into the deepening dusk. The rain had stopped, leaving the garden drenched and glistening beneath the moonlight. Beyond the hedges, she could see the silhouette of the old willow tree, its branches drooping like long, twisted fingers over the ground. "Show me," she said quietly. Hale turned. "Show you what?" "Where she was found." He hesitated. "It's not a pleasant sight. There's a reason no one goes there after dark." But Eleanor was already reaching for her coat. "Then we should go before the light's completely gone." Moments later, they were out in the chill night air, lanterns in hand, the wind whispering through the leaves. The path to the stream wound through tall grass, the earth soft beneath their boots. Every sound seemed amplified, the hoot of an owl, the rustle of the branches, the soft murmur of water ahead. As they neared the willow, Hale's voice grew low. "This is where she was found. Right here, beneath the roots." Eleanor knelt, her lantern casting a trembling glow over the ground. The soil looked freshly disturbed, as though something had shifted recently. Her breath caught when she saw a sliver of fabric half buried near the roots, a piece of faded lace, like that of an old dress. She brushed it gently with her fingers. "Someone's been here." Hale crouched beside her. "Recently." Then, faintly, from somewhere in the trees beyond the stream, came the sound of a woman's voice, soft, broken, almost like a sigh. Eleanor. She froze. The lantern flickered violently. Hale rose to his feet, scanning the darkness. "What did you say?" he asked. But Eleanor was already staring into the blackness, her pulse hammering. "That wasn't me." And from across the stream, a pale figure stepped between the trees, still, silent, and impossibly familiar. Eleanor's breath caught in her throat. The figure by the stream was shrouded in mist, its outline wavering like smoke. She could make out the shimmer of pale hair and the long, tattered coat that hung from slender shoulders. "Who are you?" Eleanor demanded, her voice steadier than she felt. The figure took a slow step forward. The lantern light trembled across the water, revealing a face that seemed impossibly young yet hauntingly familiar. Eyes like glass stared back at her, wide and unblinking. "I've been waiting," the voice said, a whisper that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "You finally came." Eleanor's knees felt weak. She turned to Hale, but he was frozen, the color drained from his face. "Do you know her?" she asked. Hale shook his head. I've never seen her before." The figure raised a hand, trembling. "I am Clara," she said, her voice barely audible above the soft rush of the stream. "You've uncovered what they tried to bury forever." Eleanor's mind spun. The box, the letters, the hidden name, everything pointed to this. "But, how? You're alive?" Clara's lips quivered. "They said I would be forgotten, that no one would remember me. But I survived, hidden, watched, waiting for the truth to come back to light." Hale stepped forward, placing a hand on Eleanor's shoulder. "We need to know everything, Clara. Every detail of what happened, who was involved." Clara shook her head, glancing toward the willow tree. "It's not safe here. They are still watching. You must trust no one, not yet." Eleanor felt a chill crawl up her spine. Who could still be watching after all these years? And what did Clara mean by surviving in hiding? The mist thickened, swirling around the figure, and then, as suddenly as she appeared, Clara stepped back into the shadows. The lantern flickered violently, and when the light steadied, she was gone. Eleanor sank to her knees, heart racing. Hale's hand gripped her arm. "We can't let her disappear again. We have to follow the clues she left, find out who wanted her gone and why." Rain began to fall softly again, cold and steady. The willow branches swayed, as though mourning the secrets that had been buried beneath them for so long. Eleanor stood, resolve hardening. She would uncover the truth, no matter the danger. Somewhere in the shadows of Ashcombe, the answers were waiting, and she would not leave without them. The wind carried a whisper through the trees, almost like a warning. Some secrets are darker than death itself. Eleanor and Hale returned to Ashcombe Manor, the old halls echoing with the steps of a storm that had begun outside. Every creak of the wooden floors and distant thunder seemed to mirror the tension coiling in Eleanor's chest. She clutched the letters tightly, the fragile paper now more valuable than ever. In the library, the fire cast long shadows across the walls lined with dusty tomes. Eleanor spread out the documents, scanning the names and dates that had haunted her for weeks. Then, in the corner of the room, she noticed a small panel in the wall, partially hidden behind a faded tapestry. "This wasn't here before," she murmured, tracing the edge with her finger. Hale knelt beside her, eyes widening. With a gentle push, the panel creaked open, revealing a narrow passageway shrouded in darkness. They stepped inside, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and old secrets. At the end of the tunnel, a faint glow illuminated a small chamber. And there she was, Clara, sitting by a single lantern, her eyes weary but alive. "Clara," Eleanor breathed, stepping forward. "We followed your trail. Please, tell us everything." Clara's hands trembled as she unfolded a bundle of papers and photographs. "They tried to erase me, to make the world believe I was gone. My father, he uncovered something they wanted hidden, something powerful. When they silenced him, they thought it would silence me too. Hale frowned. Who are they? Clara shook her head slowly. The descendants of those who built Ashcombe, those who wanted the family legacy to remain untainted. They feared what truth would do to their name. Eleanor's heart raced. And now? Why reveal yourself now? Because the truth cannot remain buried forever, Clara said, voice firm. And because you, Eleanor, have proven yourself worthy. You saw the signs, followed the clues, and never gave up. Hale placed a reassuring hand on Eleanor's shoulder. We'll help you, Clara. Whatever it takes. A storm of wind rattled the manor windows, and in the glow of the lantern, the three of them began piecing together the story that had been hidden for decades. Betrayal, secrets, and courage intertwined to reveal the full truth. Outside, the first light of dawn broke over the hills surrounding Ashcombe. It glimmered over the manor, over the willow trees, and over the hidden past that had finally come to light. For Eleanor, Hale, and Clara, the shadows of Ashcombe Manor had lifted. The secrets that had lingered for generations were now exposed, and though the journey had been perilous, the revelation brought a clarity they could never have imagined. The past could no longer haunt them, but its lessons remained. Courage, loyalty, and the pursuit of truth were stronger than fear, deception, or time itself.